Welcome to the Ridgecrest podcast. This is where we take time each week for a deeper look into the previous Sunday's sermon. My name is Matt. I'm the executive and discipleship pastor here at Ridgecrest, and joined with me is our senior pastor, Michael Estes. As always, welcome.
Morning. How's everything at the church today?
Going pretty well. It's quiet. There's not a lot of things going around, and I've got some family in town, so they're at the house where it's not so quiet. So this proved to be the best location for podcasts this morning.
We'll be back there soon. That's what's exciting, is that we're moving really quickly toward everybody being staff-wise being back at the building. So
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our staff, over the past 3 weeks have started kind of getting back on site and doing some things. And so we've kind of, similar to our reopening Ridgecrest of phases, we've kind of been doing the same thing with our staff, and a lot of them have been on site working, getting things ready for when we welcome our members back on site. And so we're excited for that. And I spoke with someone last week, one of our members, and she was asking when staff would be back on site, just because she missed driving by the church and seeing cars in the parking lot through the week. And so I thought that was encouraging to know that people miss the staff when they're not at church. And while media and technology is a great thing and provides us a great opportunity to work off site when we need to, there's also great value in being on site when we can be.
Yeah, agreed. There's nothing like being in personal space with each other physically and that sort of thing. I agree, though. I'm glad that we have the technology to do this, though.
Sure. So this week your sermon was Psalm 43. However, last week we had some information come out from the state government. Governor Reeves released some information giving churches some recommendations for resuming in-person worship and doing that safely. And so we were able to start looking towards reopening the church. As we've said all along, we would kind of submit to the government's recommendations, within reason, within our religious, convictions. And so we've done that. And so now that he's kind of offered that, it's allowed us to kind of shift our focus now to, okay, let's start resuming in-person worship. So with that being said, last week we released kind of a reopening Ridgecrest document that the staff has been working on for several weeks. We actually, finished that document up about 3 weeks ago, waiting for that government recommendation. And then once it was released, we made just a couple of adjustments that would fall in line with what they said. And so we were able to push that out to our church this past week through email, and kind of introduce what that's going to look like, and so we set a date of June 7th. We get to be back on site in person for worship. It will look different, but as you mentioned, we get to be in that personal space. So with that being said, I thought today's podcast, while your sermon was great and there was a lot of good information there that we could sit and talk through, given the circumstances, I thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to just sit through and just kind of talk through reopening Ridgecrest and talk about the exciting aspects of that, talk about some of the things that are going to be different. A phrase I like to use a lot, is not wrong, but different. And so it's one of those things where it will be different. And so we have to be patient and kind of work through some of those differences if we want to resume in-person meeting safely. So with that being said, I figure, we can just kind of talk through some things and walk through some of the common questions that we've been asked. And as you read through our phase reopening strategy, some people may ask, some of these questions. And so to just kind of get us started, our vision at Ridgecrest is to know God, serve others, and reach our world. And under those, we have kind of 3 specific things that we do in each of those areas. How would you say, how does that vision impact our decisions going into reopening?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go piece by piece here, and I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. But so let's just start with the knowing God part. Like there's a part of that knowing God that we can do on our own individually that is not really hindered in any way, shape, or form by the way we've been doing things. Personal devotion is something that I can take care of by myself. It's nice to have others working with me and in concert and that sort of thing. But in truth, I could do a lot of that on my own. It's the relational discipleship and the corporate worship that has directly been impacted by what we've been doing. Now, you can still do relational discipleship away from the four walls of the church. That you don't necessarily have to be in the building. It does help when we have our life groups that can be in proximity to each other and assist one another with needs and that sort of thing. And I think it's a huge part of relational discipleship. You can still do those sorts of things during this time period, but I do think those things are enhanced by the ability to meet together. And so, when we're thinking about reopening, part of the reason that we're reopening is because we want to help make those bonds more easily accessible. Beyond that, obviously, we have corporate worship, and that is something that has been drastically changed, obviously, over the last 8 to 9 weeks. While we're still corporately worshiping, we're having to do that in a way that's separated and not a part of what we would consider normal church life. And that's probably been the most difficult part of all this, is people getting used to this idea of worshiping at home. And I haven't had to experience it, but I have had to experience the empty sanctuary. And there's 5, 6, 10 of us there, corporately worshiping. But half of those people are running cameras, and it's or in a broadcast room, and so that you lose the sense of corporate worship when that's the case. And so I kind of feel like whenever Greg's singing, I'm on an island, and I'm sure Greg feels like when I'm up on stage and his praise team is out in the congregation, they kind of feel isolated from one another. And so there's going to be a sense in which when we reopen the church and come back together, we're going to regain that in a more, real way, a more concrete way than we've been experiencing that. And so that's a huge part of, our desire to reopen, and why we want to have a really organized process. Now, as far as the organizational piece, when we think about serving others, one of the things that we want to do as a staff that we want people to be able to do when they come back in the building is feel comfortable. We want them to feel like there's a plan and that they're safe, as safe as we can make them, understanding that there are always going to be risks in these sorts of situations. But anything that we can do to mitigate the risk, we see as a service to our church members. And that's part of the reason, like, we're doing stuff like, as a staff, we're going to wear masks, because we want to mitigate risk, right? We want to do what we can to serve our church members and do that. That's the reason we're recommending masks. And I'll get more into that a little bit later, but we can serve others through the way we do this whole process. And that's what we've taken as a part of our, that's our desire as a staff, is to serve our church through having a very thorough, very planned, very organized reopening process. And so, those are two huge parts of our vision right there. As far as reaching our world, that's something that we've been doing, I think, throughout this whole thing. But again, it's easier to do when we're together, and we can kind of coordinate and work together to make that happen a little bit more easily. So I think every part of our vision has had an impact on our desire to reopen and how we're doing it.
Yeah, and I think kind of key aspect of that is, again, it's a reopening process. We have a kind of a 3-phased reopening plan, and with that is looking at that vision and deciding what we reopen, because we can't just come in and say, all right, let's start everything back that we were doing before, because that wouldn't be wise, it wouldn't be safe for our people. And so that's, again, kind of going back to that vision. Every little thing that we say, okay, we're going to resume this activity, it's because it's very closely tied to our vision. And so as we start reopening, I know there'll be certain things that, I'll give one example, like meals, at this point in time, through our phases, we're not doing any kind of, food service or anything like that because of, the additional precautions they kind of take there. And so I know a lot of our people really enjoy, Wednesday night meals. Typically we don't do those in the summer anyway, so it kind of works out, but it's one of those things that people will miss, and not saying we'll never do those, but through these phases, we're not going to. And so there's some things like that. Not saying that that's not an important time of fellowship. It's just, again, figuring out if we have to open slowly and do this phase reopening, we have to be very careful in picking what we reopen and what we hold back on.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask if you don't mind kind of walking us through those 3 phases, in a simple way, so that we can have a pretty good idea of like how the phased reopening works and how we're going to progress through that. So can you kind of give us some detail as far as that goes?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting, with this phase reopening, we have to really train our brains to think a new normal. Because truth of the matter is, I don't know when we'll ever get back to what we perceive as normal. Some of these things are going to continue into the future. Some of these are great, talking about, washing your hands, using sanitizer, things like that. If we did a better job at that during flu season, we would see a whole lot less sickness and stuff running through, children's ministry and, parents bringing their kids who are sick and, getting others sick. And so there are some things, aspect of this, while COVID is very different, in that regard, it's still some practical things that we can carry on into the future and do a better job at and being a little bit more intentional with. Mm-hmm. And so the phases kind of help us work our way, towards a normal, but again, it's a new normal. So phase one, briefly, is we'll begin on June 7th. This is our most restricted phase, where our capacity will be limited to under 50%. And when I say under 50%, really in phase one, it's going to be closer to 30, maybe 40%. The governors ask that you do not go over 50%, but in phase one, we'll probably be closer to 30, 40%. That way people have plenty of room to spread out in the worship center. People, aren't right on top of each other, or, at a minimum of 6 feet, they'll be further than that, just to allow some of that, just extra, precautions. We will only, in phase one, it's only worship service. So we're only offering corporate worship in person. Our life groups will continue to meet via Zoom. Some groups may choose to meet outside, which is completely, welcome. They're welcome to do that as long as they keep it under 20 people as far as our current, recommendations under the government guidance. One of the things that we're doing to help make sure people have a seat, and kind of, we don't have to worry about people getting here and we're at that 50% capacity and saying, sorry, we can't let you in. We don't want to do that. And so we'd much rather people go ahead and pre-register. So we have a website, where individuals are able to go there. They can access it from our church website by clicking the little COVID update tab, or scroll down on our homepage and they'll see a Know God image. And they're able to click that and it'll take them to that seat reservation. And it's, just like going to a sporting event where you just kind of zoom up and pick your seats. And that way people can know that every other seat, there's seats between them and other families, things of that sort. As I mentioned, we won't have any food, coffee stations. You already made reference to masks. All of our staff and all of our volunteers will be wearing masks. And then they're strongly recommended for those who attend. We're not saying that they're not required for people who are attending worship. However, they, even Dr. Dobbs, with Mississippi Health Department, has specifically, strongly encouraged masks. So if you have a mask, we've handed them out past couple of weeks. A lot of people have received those. Again, you'll be here on site for an hour. Wear one, and we'll talk, a little bit more about, I'm going to ask you to kind of clarify the mask here, in just a second. So that sort of thing. We'll have some designated entrances and exits in phase one, and so a lot of, again, very different things. It's not going to be church as we know church from the past. It's going to be very different for this first phase, so we can ease into it. And then phase two will lift some of those restrictions, where during phase two is when we plan to open up preschool ministry and possibly some children's ministry aspect as well, and things like that. And they'll be able, we'll have some new processes for children's check-in and things of that sort. Phase three is when our life groups would start meeting on site again. And, that's kind of the key marker of phase three. And again, you're able to reduce or increase capacity in our worship center a little bit there at phase three. And so the key thing is to know that as we progress through the phases, they're very fluid. Phase one could last longer than phase two, or, shorter than phase two. And we're just going to be very careful to pay close attention to our people and walk through it as best we can. We want to walk through it as fast as we can to get through these phases, but we also want to go as slow as we can, to make sure we're doing it wisely and safely. And so it will be different. And, if people, want to, look further into that, again, visit our website, click that COVID update, and they'll find some buttons in there to access the full information of all of our phases.
Yeah, I would encourage our people as much as possible to be okay with a little bit of uncertainty. That doesn't mean that we have no idea or we're not sure. I mean, in truth, if you were to sit down and talk to any one of us on staff about kind of the plan and what we think about the plan and where we're going with the plan, we all have a pretty good idea of the way we think this thing's going to play out. But we also, if you're going to ask for like specifics on certain things, we're also going to have to say, I don't know right now, or I'm not sure at this point. So, like if somebody were to ask how much of this is going to be permanent, the answer is we don't know at this point. Maybe none of it. It could be, large portions of it. We just really don't know. We have to constantly reassess the situation, and that's what we're doing. That's what we've been doing this whole time, is just kind of reassessing. And each week we get together and what's working, what's not working, what can we do better? What did we not do well? And we're going to do the same thing each week of this reopening. Is we're just going to figure out what's working, what's not working. We're looking at information from other churches that have already reopened. I'm going to have I shared this with you earlier. I'm going to have a conversation with a pastor in South Carolina whose church has been open for a couple of weeks now. And I'm just going to find out from him, what are some of the challenges they've faced, and, how might that inform us? Or, how solid is our plan? We think it's really solid. We think it's very thorough, and we've thought about a lot of different things. And, we think that we're really, really ready, but we also know that we need wisdom, and wisdom comes to, look at Proverbs over and over and over again. It talks about the idea of an abundance of counselors. In an abundance of counselors, there's wisdom. So we're looking at, all kinds of sources of information for help. But I want to encourage our people just to be okay with a little bit of uncertainty. And not, again, that doesn't mean we don't know at all. It just means that we don't know completely.
Yeah, that's good. And I will reiterate, you mentioned talking to other churches. This reopening plan is something, as I mentioned, we started several weeks ago. As soon as some other states started allowing their churches to meet again, we started looking at those churches, seeing what they were doing. And, and so that's how we started crafting our stuff. And so this isn't something that we just, while it is created specific for Ridgecrest, it's not something where we just sat around and just said, oh, let's do this. No, we looked at states like Tennessee, churches there. Being from Tennessee, I had the opportunity to talk to several churches there to talk about what was going well, what wasn't going well, and some things like that. Looked at churches in Georgia, looked at churches in Texas, and, used all those pieces of information to assemble something that's going to be very specific to Ridgecrest and work for us. I've had some other churches in Mississippi area reach out to us, asking about, some of the processes we're doing and things we're doing there. And so, they like the product that's out there for our reopening process. And so I think that our staff has done a great job, working on this and really getting us to a point to where we can work through this. And again, like you said, we have to be flexible because things could change, but I think we're in a good spot to jump in. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to masks for a minute, because I know that this is a question that a lot of people, say, as I mentioned, staff and volunteers are required to wear them. Our volunteers are strongly recommended. Me personally, I don't like wearing masks. I have been, when I go out to the grocery store or Walmart, or, have to pick up some supplies, I'll wear a mask. Not because I'm concerned with myself catching COVID, but essentially for others. And so would you talk on that a little bit? I know you did address that a little bit in your Facebook Live that you did last week, but I just want you to kind of clarify, why masks?
Yeah. So to go into a little bit more detail, I look at masks as, again, I'm like you, they're inconvenient. I wear glasses a lot, and they fog up my glasses every single. And I've tried all kinds of different little life hacks to get it not to happen, but it does, and it's annoying. But I see the wearing of a mask as an issue of neighbor love, and that doesn't mean that people who don't wear masks don't love their neighbors. I think it just means that if you're not going to wear a mask, you have to be very conscious about the fact that you need to be careful about how close you get to people, how long you spend in their presence, those sorts of things. I think you have to take other steps to help mitigate, the possibility of transmitting COVID to somebody else. Because the truth is, there's a large portion of the population that has shown to be asymptomatic. And, we don't know. I think that's another thing that's made this so difficult and so frustrating for a lot of people is because it is a disease that has a lot of uncertainty around it. I could have had the disease, or I could have been symptomatic or asymptomatic, but still, been able to transmit the disease to other people and never even known it. And since that's the case, I have to think to myself, what can I do to help mitigate, the possibility of transmission to somebody else? And I know that there's conflicting evidence out there and people have different opinions, that sort of thing. The vast majority of opinions that I have seen have been opinions that masks help. They don't prevent, they don't completely stop, they don't completely, shut down the risk of transmission, but they help. And so my desire is to help my neighbor and do the things that I can to help, protect them as much as possible. And so, and just so as far as staff and that sort of thing, I'm not going to preach with a mask on, but part of the reason that I'm not going to preach with a mask on is because I'm about 15 to 20 feet from anybody else. And I'll be in the service with a mask on until I go up on stage. Same thing with Greg. When he's on stage, and I'm sure our worship team as well, when they're on stage, they won't wear a mask, but when they come off stage, they will. When we're in the presence of other people or close to other people, we want to make sure, again, that we're doing our part to help as much as possible. I know that people are going to have differing opinions on that. I was thinking about Romans 14 as I kind of thought about this particular issue. I want to encourage us as a church to be incredibly kind to one another when it comes to this particular issue, because you may have very strong opinions in the opposite direction of my opinion. That's okay. I think we as believers can care for one another, be in dialogue with one another, disagree with one another, but do it in a way that is genuine and Christ-like, and is not going to hinder our witness to the outside world in any way, shape, or form. So Romans 14, I'm just going to read the very first couple of verses. Paul says, "As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions." In other words, when you are, in a conversation with somebody that you may think, for whatever reason, they don't line up with my beliefs, as long as it's not something that is essential to the Christian faith, like that Jesus physically died on the cross for our sin and rose from the dead with a physical body. That is an essential Christian belief. If a person doesn't believe that, then they're outside of the faith, and you need to have a strong conversation with them about, if they're claiming to be a Christian. But if a person says that, you've got to wear a mask, that is not an essential part of the Christian faith. You can disagree with that person and do it in a way that's respectful, but don't make a big deal out of it. Don't quarrel with them over that opinion. He goes on to say, one person believes he may eat anything. He's talking about, the right to eat certain things and not eat and that sort of thing. So he says one person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed them both, or him. So the idea here is that simply, we can disagree about these things and still love each other in Christ. It's not something that makes you a believer or doesn't make you a believer. And so it's really important that we understand that as we think about the idea of mask. And honestly, if you think about the next couple of questions that we're going to talk about, 2 services, seat reservations, all of these things kind of fall into the category of, we're going to have differing opinions over this. We're going to love each other through that. And ultimately, we need to see that this is none of these things are essential to walking with Christ. So,
yeah, you have unity in those essentials or non-negotiables, and you show liberty and grace in those negotiables. And so I think that's key. And, as in that, Romans 14, as you get there towards the end of the chapter there, again, it kind of reiterates the idea of sometimes, those people who typically eat meat would abstain, from eating meat when they're in the company of the individuals who are very convicted with eating meat. And so kind of same things. I don't want to wear a mask, but with me being in the presence of some individuals who might be high risk, because the truth of the matter is, I don't know who's high risk.
Right.
I could be interacting with 500 people that are here on our church campus on a given weekend. I don't know their health background. So I have to assume everyone is high risk. And so for that reason, I'm going to wear a mask. And while I don't want to, I don't like it, I'm going to do it because I care more about that person and their safety than my personal comfort. And again, that's not everybody, because there's some individuals who may have health problems that prevent them from wearing a mask, and so there's that side of it too. So, again, I think Romans 14 is a great place to look, where you can't pass judgment on either side. However, I can make the decision, based on my health and the other health, other individuals' health, of people surrounding me.
Yeah.
Another kind of key thing we talked through and walking through the phases is the idea of 2 services. We have a very large worship center. When all this started, we walked through and kind of figured out that our capacity is about 1,000 people in there as far as seats in the worship center. And so even at 50%, you could be at 500 people in our congregation. Before COVID, we were running about 550 individuals. So we could almost do that just in that. However, we've looked at doing 2 services. And I think that there's a couple of reasons behind that. So I'll let you start the conversation, and then I'll jump in on the maybe logistic side of it.
Yeah. So again, this goes back to the idea of we want to do everything possible because we want to serve our congregation to mitigate risk. And one of the things that when we were thinking about 2 services, one of the things that we were thinking through is this idea that we could create a service that, while not exclusively for those who are high risk, it provides a place that maybe feels a little bit safer and is, just from a number standpoint and an ability to space out from one another standpoint, it is a little bit safer. And so we looked at the 9 and the 10:30, and the 9 o'clock service will be not exclusively for those who are high risk, but an opportunity for those who maybe feel like they're a little bit more unsure about coming back to church, and because of health risk or because of age or whatever, whatever it is, maybe anxiety, it gives them a place that's going to be a little less crowded, and a little bit more ability just to space out from others, but still be there. And if you look at you and I were talking a little bit about the sign up already. If you look at the sign up, that's going to be the case in the 9 o'clock service. There's going to be more room for people. It's not to say that the 10:30 service is just packed and that we're going to be on top of each other, but that's a place for those who feel a little bit a little less sure about coming back. That I think will feel a little bit safer, be a little bit safer. Just from the ability, again, to space out, to have room for themselves, and to not feel, that maybe the anxiety or the nervousness that might come from being close to others. And so that's a big part of the reason why we went with 2 services. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. And, and because like you said, that first, now essentially both services are going to help us be easily below that 50% mark.
Right.
So that way, while the first service is really geared towards those individuals, to provide them an opportunity to attend a service that they feel most safe in and have the most room to spread out, and those types of things. Again, it's not exclusive to those individuals. However, if someone is high risk, we encourage them to go to that service, because it's going to be the absolute cleanest it could possibly be, because you got a full week of cleaning that will be going into it. Not to say the second service isn't going to be clean. But, there's a difference of a week-long cleaning and a 30-minute cleaning that takes place in between. So you have that, and then also that provides opportunity for, some families with younger kids. Again, you have some more room to spread out. And I know I've got a 5-year-old, so I have no idea what it's going to be like, him in there, and he's been watching the service at home. So, he's a little bit used to it, but it's still going to be different. And he might, take up a little bit more room. So I mean, there's some options like that. And so while our auditorium's not going, our worship center is not going to be full to capacity by any means, or necessarily even approaching that 50% in either service. I think that's a great point, is really what the decision that our final decision in that was, because let's create an opportunity for those at high risk. And then that also in turn helps everyone else spread out a little more as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I would add to, one of the things I want to encourage people, again, going back to this idea of kind of a new normal and kind of getting used to just things being a little bit different, especially at the beginning, phase one in particular, is I want to encourage our people to be very patient with one another. If there's a little extra noise or distraction in the services, that's okay. I'm going to tell you, as the person that's going to be on stage and delivering a sermon, it's not going to bother me. I want our young families to feel like they can come to church and not worry about their kids. If they're squirmy, or if they get loud for a minute, or you got to take them out for just a second. And I mean, take them outside, not like literally take them. But if you got to do those things, then that's okay. I have learned how to teach through distraction. I taught teenagers for 12 years, and if anybody can come up with distractions, it's them.
Yeah, teenagers are never distracting
at all. With one I have at home who comes up with all kinds of crazy ideas and things. I know that it may feel weird or strange, but the truth is, and I don't want you to spend the entire service as a young family thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, my kid's being loud right now. These people are looking. From your pastor, I'm telling you right now, it's not going to bother me at all. I'm going to keep preaching right on through it, and I want you to feel at home in the sanctuary and not worry about any kind of thing like that. All three of my kids started attending what we would call big church when they were very young, because the church that they were in back when they were younger, we didn't have like children's ministry that went on during the church service. Everybody was in the sanctuary together, and we worked our way through that. And there were some days where it was enjoyable, and there were some days where it was frustrating, but the truth is it was worth it. And it was good. My kids learned how to be in the sanctuary with me and to, in their own way, enjoy the service, parts of the service, that they could actually participate in. And so, just know that is our heart as a staff. We want you to feel completely comfortable coming in there.
Yeah. And I ask as a parent of a young child, again, going back to that Romans 14, show our family grace and love. If our 5-year-old does, get an attitude in the middle of a sermon or, something, and we do have to step out or whatever it might be, or, if he's, whatever, for all those families. And so we've got a great community of believers, here at Ridgecrest, and I have no reason to believe that anyone in our community of faith would intentionally try to, look down on those families with young kids in this time. And, it'll be a great opportunity for us to experience, again, church different, and you'll get to experience some family worship.
Yep. Agreed.
We talk through seat reservations. Main thing there is to, again, make sure you have a spot and you're able to make sure you can pick a seat that, is kind of spaced out from some other families and things like that. And just to make sure we're at capacity. Again, we did the 2 services so that we have a little extra room to spread out. And so we'll have that. If someone doesn't register online, it's okay. We've got some seats specifically reserved for those individuals. That way, if some reason you forget, they can show up and do that. This will be done every week. This isn't a recurring reservation. So as soon as June 7th is complete, we'll put up the next week's service, and at that point kind of see how that's going and make any changes that we may need to do.
Will that information be pushed out via email like throughout, each week as we do that? Is that going to be the easiest way to do that? Or will there be like a place that we can go each week and just know that this is the place we go?
Yeah, easiest way to go would just be go to our website, ridgecrest.net. Scroll down on the homepage, and you'll see a little graphic there that says "Know God." You click that, and boom, it'll take you straight to the reservation page, and it'll constantly show all those events. And that way, too, if an individual attends a 10:30 service and the next week says, "Well, I'd rather attend the 9 o'clock now that I've been here," they're free to do that, or vice versa. And so it gives you some flexibility. You're not, again, when you reserve the seat, you're not saying this is my seat from now until eternity. You're saying, hey, this is where I'm going to sit this Sunday. And then as we do this a little bit, we might extend that to where we put multiple weeks up there. So if hey, I'm going to be here for the next 3 weeks, and then I'm going to be out of town, you can go ahead and reserve your seat for 3 weeks, whatever it might be. But again, we're just doing this just as a help to our people, so that when they walk in on our campus on that first day, they're not trying to think, oh, where can I sit that's 6 feet apart from someone else, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of these things that we have in place are one, obviously to keep people safe, but two, to lower anxiety as much as possible, because it's been a while and it's going to be weird. We didn't want to say, hey, everybody just show up and we'll figure it out. We do want to try to lower the anxiety level as much as possible when we walk in the building. And I think having an organized plan like this with seat reservations, how we get in, how we get out, all those things are going to help with that.
Yeah. And another, just kind of bonus, if for those of you who are attending that first time, after you attend the first time, it'll make much more sense. But the row, all of our rows are lettered, and as you reserve a seat, you'll see that. One of the things we did, again, to try to make it easy, if you're attending that first service, your row is going to be a blue letter, and so if you look at your reservation and you're at 9:00 in row C in section 102 or whatever it might be, you're able to look, and then if you see that that's not a blue C, okay, I might be at the wrong section or whatever it might be. And we'll have greeters available, people in place to help with that. And that also helps us with cleaning afterwards, because then we'll know specifically where people sat and, can specifically target those areas and the areas around where those seats were taken. And so, and if you attend the second service, you'll be looking for those red letters, and so so we're, like you said, we're trying to make it as easy as possible. And, we thought this was the best way to do that, and just to make it, the least amount of anxiety, because that's the last thing we want is people walking into the church with all this anxiety built up of, well, how am I going to do this? Or what about this? Or am I going to have a seat? Or how am I going to know if someone, if I'm 6 feet away from someone else, and all those types of things. And so, again, everything we're doing is for our people, I believe. Cleaning, I'll talk on that briefly here. Again, we will have a very, very quick, but precise cleaning process that takes place between first and second service. We will be cleaning, pews and doorknobs, handles, all those types of things that need to be cleaned in between services. We have a limited amount of time, only 30 minutes between the end of the first service and the beginning of the second service. And so we will, be doing that as quickly and effectively as possible. One thing that I think, as we've kind of talked about, is encouraging individuals who are attending that second service. If they get there early, just kind of wait in their car. We're going to have greeters. They're going to have some signs that say, welcome, or hey, hang tight. I can't remember exact wording on those, but that way they know to kind of hold off and that sort of thing. Another thing, if you don't see a greeter holding one of those signs, look for the welcome flags. We have welcome flags out there every Sunday that are right there at the crosswalk. If those flags are up, that means welcome, come on in, it's clean, it's ready to go. If those flags are laying down, that means just to hang out in your car for just a moment. We're just trying to finish up getting clean. And as soon as it's clean, we'll put those flags up and allow those individuals who are in the second service time to get in, because we do have to make that transition of allowing people in the first service to get out of their car and, or get out of the church, get back to their car. And also our cleaning team to be able to detail clean everything so that it is safe and ready to go for that second service. So when you first arrive, hang out in your car for just a moment, and just wait until you see those welcome flags up and ready to go, or greeters kind of motioning that it's safe to come on in.
Yeah. And then coming in and out of the church is also, we have a plan for that. You're going to come in. If you're looking at the front of the church, the steeple, you'll come into those, you'll see people that are holding doors open for you, but there will be the doors right underneath the steeple, and then the doors to the right of that as you're looking into the church. Those will all be doors that you can access for entry. And then the exit doors will be all of the doors, if you're looking at the front of the church, to the left, to the circle drive, and in that area right there, those will be the doors for exit. And again, we'll have people in place that help with all that as well. And so, again, it's pretty thorough plan. So I guess the next question would be, and Matt, you probably have a better grasp on this, is what do we need as far as volunteers?
Yeah, that's a great question. We will need key aspect in phase one is going to be greeters. We will, need some greeters who are, feel comfortable, being here and holding doors open, because we want to make it, a non-contact experience. So we're going to have greeters that will be the ones holding the doors open. We'll have gloves available if they want to wear gloves, or if they don't want to wear gloves, the greeter will know I'm the only one touching this door since it's been cleaned. And then once that greeter's done, we'll clean that door for the next greeter. But we will need some greeters, to hold open doors. We'll need some greeters to be in the parking lot greeting people. Some individuals running crosswalk. A lot of our deacons step up and do that. But we will need significant amount of greeters there. Also, we're going to need some volunteers in phase two for children's ministry and preschool ministry, specifically, as we reintroduce the preschool ministry during worship. We're going to need some individuals to step up. One of the things that we are doing through these phases is, we're being very cautious in not allowing any individual who's considered high risk to serve in those areas, because the last thing we want to do is put them in a position to where they run the risk of catching the virus. And so during this phase reopening, we're asking individuals who are 65 or older, or have underlying health conditions, again, they're welcome to attend service. They're still encouraged to stay home and watch the live stream. They're still welcome to attend a service. However, at this time, we're not going to ask them to serve or volunteer. So our volunteers will be reserved for those that are under the age of 65 with no underlying health conditions. And so, that we don't like to do that, because we have a lot of really good volunteers in that demographic, specifically in children's ministry and greeters for that matter. We have a whole lot of really good volunteers that we're going to be missing out on during this phase reopening. But it provides us an opportunity for those individuals who maybe, aren't serving anywhere, or maybe have been serving somewhere, but now with this, that area is not going to be open, or whatever it may be. Great opportunity to serve as a greeter, start looking towards being on a rotation in preschool ministry and some things like that. I'll tell you this, and those of you who are listening, if you want to volunteer as a greeter, reach out to Brian Wright. His email is bwright@ridgecrest.net. If you want to go ahead and sign up and say, hey, I'll serve in preschool once a month, or once every few weeks, or whatever it might be, reach out to Stacy Albritton, and that is sallbritton@ridgecrest.net. Both of them will be very eager and very happy to get that information from you, and then they'll also be setting up some specific training and all those types of things to get you equipped, so you're not walking into something blind, but you're fully aware of what's going on, and you're fully aware of what needs to happen and how you can best protect the individuals that you're going to be serving as you serve others by impacting your church.
Yeah.
I think that's great. One last question that I know of offhand, and if we have any other questions, Michael, that you think of or think like we need to address, feel free to ask. And this podcast is a little longer than our other podcast. However, it's a very special edition of Reopening Ridgecrest edition. So I think it's warranted. But, one question that I've had is, what happens if there is an outbreak? Unfortunately, as we continue to monitor the situation, I know of 4 churches across the country that have experienced an outbreak since reopening. And so it is one of those things that is possible, while we're taking every precaution we can to prevent it. Again, as you mentioned earlier, it's preventions. It's not, complete, safeguards. It's just, things we can do to best prevent an outbreak. So it can happen. Singing is one of those kind of at-risk categories of things to do, because as you sing, you're really projecting your voice, and you're projecting, those air droplets, moisture droplets that carry the virus. And so again, while masks are strongly recommended, so there are some things that we're going to be doing that are a little bit more risky than just going to the grocery store or some things like that. And so if we have an outbreak, and again, we're praying we don't, we're putting all the safeguards in place that we possibly can to not have one. There are a couple of things that we'll have to do. Number one, Governor Reeves says that, when an outbreak happens, or if we find out an individual has contracted COVID and they attended one of our worship services, the first thing we have to do is contact the health department. We do not have to report names of individuals. This isn't something like, oh, so-and-so caught the virus, so I'm going to call the health department and tell them. It has nothing to do with that. We won't reveal any names of any of our people of that sort at all.
Mm-hmm.
We'll protect the privacy of all of our people. But we will have to contact the health department and say, hey, we had an individual who has tested positive for COVID and attended our service. They will then give us guidance and say, you either have to close down for X number of days as far as not having those in-person gatherings, and so we'll have to go back to live stream, or any additional recommendations or guidance. But that comes from the health department. Second thing we'll do once we've contacted them, we'll send out communication. Again, by people reserving their seat, we would know specifically who attended which service. Again, we're not reporting that to any kind of government agency or anything like that. That's just for us internally. So that way, if Matt tests positive for COVID-19, he was here for a 9 o'clock service, I can send out an email quickly to everyone who was in that 9 o'clock service and say, hey, one of our members who attended this the 9 o'clock service has tested positive for, COVID-19. We would recommend you self-quarantine for X amount of days, whatever the guidelines are at that point in time, just to protect yourself and those around you. We can also send out an email to everyone who attended that 10:30 service and say, hey, someone in the 9 o'clock service tested positive. You should take these precautions. And so that's, again, another great reason to reserve, because if people don't make those reservations, we would have to send out something church-wide, and I don't know that that's necessarily beneficial. I believe the least, concern or things that we can do, in that is the best. And so, that's kind of what it would look like if we did find out someone tested positive.
Yeah, and the thing that we want to emphasize from a spiritual perspective is the idea that, like, we're not supposed to panic when that happens. I mean, that's a bit obviously a big characteristic of what's been going on, is it's been reaction, and then let's think about what we've done. And in this case, we're thinking ahead so that if this does happen, and it may, these are the things that you should do. These are the things that you should think about. And again, like, when you go on and reserve your seats, and Matt, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but when you go on reserve seats and stuff like that, you can't see who else has reserved seats. It's all of this stuff is done to protect your privacy and that sort of thing. But we want to be able to have an organized plan in case things happen that we need to deal with, and that's one of the easiest ways for us to be able to do that, is to, again, because like the last thing we want to do is create extra paranoia. We don't want to create extra panic, because there's no reason for us to live life that way. God has called us to a life of peace, and that doesn't mean that we don't concern ourselves. We're indifferent to the things the people in the world are going through. But the truth is, we're also not called to freak out every single time something bad happens. And we believe that God is sovereign, and we're as a part of His sovereignty, has given us a mind where we can use common sense and carefully organize and plan, and understanding that our plans only go so far, and that His sovereignty overrules all of that. We believe that it's our job as a staff to think of as much as we possibly can before we enter the building as a family. And so, that's why we want to have a plan if there is, somebody that tests positive or there's an outbreak. Again, all of this is about taking care of our church family and doing everything that we can to make sure people are comfortable, safe, not anxious, and have a really enjoyable experience when we re-enter the building.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that I'll say often, to our staff and others is, I would much rather have a plan in place that needs to be altered than to not have a plan and have to try to figure it out. And so I think that's where we are as a church. We have a very detailed plan for reopening Ridgecrest. Some of our members may look at it and say, well, this is crazy. This is just too much stuff. We're being over the top. Again, the idea behind that is, let's create a plan as detailed and clear and concise as possible. That, because if you know all these answers and you have all these plans in place, if something goes wrong, it's very easy to make a slight adjustment, rather than it is, we didn't plan for this, now we've got to figure out a plan. And so I think that's where we are. Again, our staff's worked really hard and has been very eager to get our people back on site, and we're all looking forward to it. But again, it's going to require all of us to have patience, to step up and be flexible, and then really look for the opportunities to serve others, in our church, in our families and in our community.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We love our church family, and this is a way of showing that.
Yep, absolutely. If you have any additional questions or any hesitations as far as reopening Ridgecrest goes, we want to hear from you. You can email Michael at mestes@ridgecrest.net. You can email myself at mcloyd@ridgecrest.net. You can contact myself here, at the church office. Church office phone number is 601-853-1090. My extension is 103. So give me a call. I'll be happy to walk through any of the logistics side of things, or understanding exactly what that process is going to look like. Watch social media, watch your email, as we're going to be releasing a whole lot more information when this podcast is released, as well as beyond that, between now and June 7th, when we do that first reopening. Whole lot of information will be out there to provide you, again, as much detail as possible, so that first Sunday back, you feel as comfortable and as safe as you possibly can. You have the least amount of anxiety about returning or understanding the processes, and you can walk into the worship that Sunday with only one thing on your mind. That's to truly worship God, the creator of our universe, through that corporate time of worship, and our first time being together in several weeks. So again, don't hesitate to reach out. We appreciate everyone who's listened to our podcast or watched it. And as always, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.